Ever notice how the most dangerous predators in nature rarely advertise their presence? They strike silently when least expected. Machiavelli understood this fundamental truth about power 5 centuries ago, yet most people today get it completely backward. Think about it. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. Those constantly flexing their strengths, they're actually revealing their vulnerabilities. True power operates in the shadows. Machiavelli's most overlooked insight wasn't about cruelty or manipulation. It was about strategic invisibility. He discovered that broadcasting your capabilities does 2 dangerous things. It alerts your competitors and removes your greatest advantage. Surprise! History's most influential figures mastered this principle. They cultivated a facade that concealed their true abilities. While opponents underestimated them, they quietly built empires. They understood that being perpetually undervalued is actually an incredible strategic asset. In the next few minutes, I'll reveal how this forgotten Machiavellian principle can transform your career, relationships, and personal influence. You'll learn why the strongest people you know never had to tell you they were strong, and why, starting today, your greatest strength should remain invisible. Number 1. The shadow competence strategy. Have you ever played poker? If so, you know the worst thing you can do is reveal your hand. The same principle applies to life's most important competitions. Most people can't wait to show everyone their full hand, their complete set of skills, talents, and capabilities. They post every achievement on social media. They tell everyone about their latest win. But what happens when you reveal everything? People prepare for you. They develop countermeasures. They build defenses specifically designed to neutralize your known strengths, and suddenly, your advantage disappears. Consider this. Throughout history, the most successful military generals always kept at least 1 battalion hidden from view. When the enemy thought they had accounted for all forces, this invisible unit would strike from an unexpected direction. The psychological impact was devastating, not just physical defeat, but complete mental collapse. Your life operates on similar principles. When people think they've figured you out completely, they develop a mental model of who you are and what you're capable of. This model becomes rigid over time. They stop paying close attention. They make assumptions. And that's exactly when having a hidden strength becomes your most powerful asset. This brings us to tip number 1 of 5, the shadow competence strategy. Rather than pursuing recognition for every skill, deliberately keep one significant strength completely hidden from view. This isn't about being deceptive, it's about strategic power management. Here's how to implement this. First, catalog all your notable skills and strengths. Next, identify one high-value ability that you can reasonably keep concealed. This might be analytical thinking, negotiation prowess, technical knowledge, or emotional intelligence. The key is selecting something genuinely powerful but not obviously visible in daily interactions. Then, practice this skill privately. Develop it to an exceptional level. Read books about it. Take online courses. Find mentors who can guide you. But don't broadcast this development process. Let this capability mature in darkness, like a seed growing underground, before suddenly emerging as a full-grown plant. When do you reveal this shadow competence? Only at decisive moments when the stakes are highest, when others have committed to strategies assuming you lack this capability. The effect creates what psychologists call a reality rupture, when people's mental model of you suddenly shatters, leaving them psychologically vulnerable and unable to respond effectively. This technique has helped countless leaders, negotiators, and strategists achieve seemingly impossible victories. They appeared one-dimensional until the critical moment when revealing their hidden dimension changed everything. Your shadow competence isn't just another tool, It's your secret weapon that no one sees coming until it's too late for them to adapt. Number 2. The strategic underperformance principle. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to rise through organizational ranks with surprising speed? Sometimes it's not because they consistently outshine everyone, but because they understood precisely when to shine. This counterintuitive approach challenges everything we're taught about success. From childhood, we're programmed to display our best efforts at all times. Always do your best becomes a mantra, repeated through school and into professional life. But what if this conventional wisdom actually limits your long-term power and influence? What if strategic restraint could actually accelerate your progress? Think about competitive sports for a moment. The most sophisticated athletes don't reveal their full capabilities during practice sessions. They conserve their peak performance for championship moments. They understand that constantly operating at maximum output has two significant drawbacks. It causes premature burnout, and it allows opponents to develop effective countermeasures. The same principle applies in professional and social contexts. When you consistently perform at your absolute maximum, you establish a baseline expectation that becomes increasingly difficult to exceed. People become accustomed to your level of excellence, and it no longer generates surprise or appreciation. Even worse, you create a situation where anything less than perfection is perceived as failure. This brings us to tip number 2 of 5, the strategic underperformance principle. Identify specific situations where appearing average yields greater long-term advantages than immediate excellence. This isn't about sabotaging yourself or producing poor work. It's about selectively calibrating your visible performance to manipulate others' expectations in your favor. Here's the practical application. First, identify environments where you're being evaluated over extended periods rather than in single instances. These are perfect opportunities for strategic underperformance. Next, deliberately operate at around 70% of your true capability in initial interactions or projects. Deliver solid, respectable work, but nothing that causes others to develop extraordinarily high expectations. Then, as critical evaluation periods or high-stakes situations approach, gradually reveal more of your actual capability. The gap between what others perceived as your ceiling and what you actually deliver creates a powerful impression of rapid growth and exceptional potential. This perceived trajectory often matters more than absolute performance levels when it comes to promotions, opportunities, and influence. Consider how this creates a competitive moat around you. When others consistently perform at their maximum, they become predictable. Their limitations are visible to all, but when you maintain this gap between perceived and actual ability, you remain enigmatic and full of apparent potential. People become invested in your development, curious about your limits, and eager to see what you might accomplish next. The strategic underperformance principle isn't about being lazy or dishonest. It's about understanding that human perception operates on relative rather than absolute scales. By controlling the visibility of your capabilities, you gain extraordinary influence over how others value your contributions and potential. Number 3. The reverse transparency technique. We live in an age that worships transparency. Be authentic, every self-help guru proclaims. Share your journey, social media platforms encourage. The modern ethos suggests that revealing everything about yourself builds trust and connection. But this approach fundamentally misunderstands human psychology and the true nature of influence. Think about the people who fascinate you most. Are they completely open books? Or do they maintain a certain mystery, revealing enough to be relatable while keeping parts of themselves carefully guarded? This selective disclosure creates magnetic attraction because humans are naturally drawn to puzzles we haven't completely solved. Consider the most compelling stories and films. They don't reveal everything at once. They create curiosity gaps, providing enough information to hook interest while withholding key elements that keep us engaged. Our minds are designed to fill these gaps, often in ways that align with our hopes and desires. The same psychological principle applies to personal influence. When you're completely transparent, people quickly categorize and dismiss you. There's no mystery to solve, no depths to explore. But when you create thoughtful boundaries around certain information, you transform from an open book into an intriguing narrative that others want to understand more deeply. This brings us to tip number 3 of 5, the reverse transparency technique. While authenticity is celebrated today, selective opacity actually creates power. The key is developing a carefully crafted transparency illusion, appearing open about certain aspects of yourself while maintaining complete control over critical information. This paradoxically builds deeper trust while preserving your strategic advantages. Here's how to implement this approach. First, identify information that can be freely shared. Your general background, certain personal anecdotes, and professional experiences that align with your desired perception. Be genuinely open and warm when sharing these elements. Next, identify the critical information that provides strategic advantage when kept private. This typically includes your detailed decision-making process, specific capabilities, certain relationships, and long-term objectives. These aren't shared even when directly asked. Instead, they're protected through artful deflection or by sharing adjacent information that satisfies curiosity without revealing what matters. The effectiveness comes from how these two categories interact. By being unusually forthcoming about the first category, you create a perception of transparency that extends to all aspects of your character. This perceived openness creates a trust halo that actually enables you to keep the second category completely private without arousing suspicion. Notice how this differs from simple secrecy. Secretive people create distrust because their boundaries are obvious and suspicious. The reverse transparency technique instead creates an impression of accessibility while actually protecting what matters most. The very people who feel they know you completely are often those who know the least about your true strategic positioning. This approach has powered some of history's most influential figures. They appeared to speak candidly while revealing remarkably little of strategic value. They understood that influence doesn't come from total disclosure, but from creating the perfect balance between accessibility and mystery. Master this technique, and you'll find people drawn to your apparent openness while never truly understanding the sources of your power. Number 4. The competence-modesty ratio. Have you ever noticed how some highly capable people seem to get overlooked for opportunities, while others with moderate talents rise quickly? The difference often isn't about ability, it's about the relationship between ability and how it's presented. Most people get this relationship dangerously wrong, and it costs them valuable opportunities. Throughout history, we've been given conflicting advice. Don't hide your light under a bushel, some say, encouraging bold self-promotion. Let your work speak for itself, others counsel, suggesting quiet competence. Both approaches fail because they don't recognize the mathematical relationship between actual capability and its optimal presentation. Consider 2 common mistakes. The first is the person with moderate skills but excessive self-promotion. They initially attract attention but quickly create disappointment when their performance doesn't match their promises. The second is the highly skilled individual who refuses to acknowledge their capabilities. They may eventually be recognized, but the path is unnecessarily long and uncertain. What's missing is an understanding that there exists a precise ratio between competence and its display that maximizes influence without triggering negative reactions. This ratio isn't fixed. It shifts based on context, culture, and the specific domain of performance. Mastering this dynamic relationship gives you an immediate advantage over those who rely on generic approaches to self-presentation. This brings us to tip number 4 of 5, the competence-modesty ratio. There exists an optimal mathematical relationship between actual skill and displayed confidence. Most people intuitively get this wrong. The precise ratio for maximum influence is surprisingly counterintuitive and shifts based on specific social environments. Here's the practical implementation. First, objectively assess your competence level in relevant domains on a scale of 1 to 10. Be honest, this is for strategic purposes, not ego protection. Next, understand that the optimal display of confidence isn't directly proportional to actual ability. Instead, it follows a curved relationship. For those with lower competence levels, 1 to 3, the optimal presentation is slightly below actual ability. For mid-level performers, 4 to 7, the display should be approximately equal to actual ability. But for high performers, 8 to 10, the optimal presentation is consistently below actual capability, creating a competence surplus that manifests as consistent over-delivery rather than over-promising. The environmental context matters enormously. In highly competitive environments with short evaluation periods, the displayed confidence should increase temporarily. In collaborative environments with longer evaluation timeframes, maintaining a moderate competence surplus becomes more valuable. Consider cultural contexts, too. Some environments reward assertive self-presentation, while others value humility. The key isn't adopting a universal stance, but calibrating your approach to each specific circumstance. This requires careful observation of successful individuals in each context to identify the prevailing competence-modesty ratio. This nuanced approach explains why some people seem to navigate diverse social environments with remarkable ease. They're not simply competent or simply confident. They've mastered the precise mathematical relationship between the two. They understand that influence comes not from maximizing either variable independently, but from optimizing their relationship. By mastering this ratio across different contexts, you create a powerful impression of authentic confidence backed by consistent performance. This generates trust, opens opportunities, and builds a reputation for reliability that purely competent or purely confident individuals can never achieve. Number 5. The delayed recognition effect. Have you ever wondered why some people's careers seem to experience sudden explosive growth after years of apparent stagnation? Why certain professionals who seemed unremarkable suddenly become recognized as indispensable? The secret often lies not in a sudden improvement in their capabilities, but in a carefully engineered timing of recognition. Most people operate on a simple formula. Do good work, get immediate credit. They crave instant acknowledgement for their contributions. But this approach fundamentally misunderstands how value perception develops over time. The most sophisticated operators know that immediate recognition is fleeting, while delayed recognition compounds. Think about how financial investments work. The most powerful growth doesn't come from immediate returns, but from compound interest that accelerates over extended periods. Your professional reputation operates on similar principles. Immediate recognition creates a short spike in perceived value that quickly fades. But when recognition arrives after extended contribution, it creates a powerful narrative of discovery that dramatically amplifies your perceived value. This approach contradicts our natural instincts. We're programmed to seek immediate rewards, a psychological bias called temporal discounting. Overriding this instinct requires strategic thinking and delayed gratification, but the results can transform your career trajectory. This brings us to tip number 5 of 5. The delayed recognition effect. Power compounds when recognition lags behind actual capability. Deliberately engineer situations where your contributions are realized retrospectively rather than immediately. This creates a psychological crescendo effect, where your perceived value continuously increases over time, rather than plateauing after initial recognition. Here's how to implement this strategy. First, identify projects or initiatives where you can make substantial contributions that aren't immediately visible to decision-makers. These are situations where the true value emerges gradually, over weeks or months. Next, focus on addressing fundamental issues rather than surface symptoms. Surface fixes get immediate acclaim, but are quickly forgotten. Structural improvements often go unnoticed initially, but create lasting impact that becomes increasingly apparent. Then document your contributions privately but thoroughly. Keep detailed records of your approach, decisions, and outcomes. This isn't for immediate sharing, but serves as validation when recognition eventually occurs. Most importantly, resist the urge to highlight your contributions prematurely. Allow others to discover them naturally as results materialize. The psychological impact is powerful. When people feel they've discovered your value themselves, they become invested in promoting your contributions. They feel insightful for recognizing what others missed. This creates advocates far more committed than if you had simply told them about your work initially. This technique creates what psychologists call the crescendo effect, where your perceived value doesn't plateau after recognition, but continues to increase as people retrospectively reinterpret your past actions. Previously overlooked contributions suddenly appear strategic. Regular work gets reinterpreted as exceptional foresight. This retrospective enhancement can dramatically accelerate your progress once recognition begins. The delayed recognition effect isn't about hiding your light permanently. It's about timing its revelation for maximum impact. By allowing your contributions to be discovered rather than announced, you create a perception of depth that immediate self-promotion can never achieve. You transform from someone seeking validation into someone whose value others feel privileged to have discovered. The principles we've explored today reveal a profound truth that Machiavelli understood centuries ago. True power often works best when partially concealed. From the shadow competence strategy to the delayed recognition effect, these techniques all share a common insight. What remains unseen can become your greatest strength. This isn't about deception, it's about strategic management of perception. It's understanding that human psychology responds more powerfully to discovery than to declaration. By creating the right gaps between capability and visibility, you generate curiosity, respect, and influence that direct approaches cannot achieve. As you implement these principles, remember that they work together as a system. Your shadow competence becomes more powerful when combined with strategic underperformance. Your reverse transparency gains strength when aligned with the optimal competence-modesty ratio. Master this integrated approach, and you'll navigate professional and social landscapes with unprecedented effectiveness. The ultimate paradox of power is this: the more deliberately you conceal certain strengths, the more your overall influence expands. In a world obsessed with visibility, those who understand the strategic value of invisibility gain an advantage that others can't even comprehend, exactly as Machiavelli intended.